She's as old as time itself. She shaped our mountains and glens and lochs and corries. She created Scotland. She brings us winter every year. This is the story of the Cailleach Beira. So Cailleach in Gaelic has a lot of translations in English. It could simply mean an old woman. It could also mean a wise woman. It could mean a hag or a witch or a goddess or a creator. Well, Beira lived at the very centre of the earth with her 8 sisters. And all day, every day, they mined and hewed the rocks at the centre of the earth and placed them very carefully into woven creels which they wore on their backs. And when the baskets were full, they made their way up out of the centre of the earth into the ocean. And from there they each picked a direction and strode out across the waves. Beira too picked a direction and strode out into the sea. And when she grew tired, she took off her heavy creel full of rocks and began unloading the rocks very carefully, one by one, until the basket was empty. Now Beira also wielded a mighty hammer, a bit like Thor's hammer. And with this hammer, she began shaping and sculpting the rocks into mountains and glens and lochs and corries. And this is the land that we now know as Oliba, or Scotland. Now, when her creating work was done, the white plaid that she wore was a bit grubby. It was a bit worse for wear. So she strode to the sea and took off her plaid and began washing it so vigorously in the waves that the waters were whirling and swirling around. And this became known as a place called Corrivreckan, or Corrie, or the cauldron of the plaid, where Beira washed her plaid. And it's a real place just off the coast of Jura on the west. So, when her plaid was clean again, she lifted it carefully up out of the waves and laid it to dry across the tops of the mountains. So, whenever you see white on the tops of the mountains, you know that we're under the reign and the protection of Beira, who is the goddess of winter. So when her plaid was dry again, she lifted it carefully up off the tops of the mountains and wrapped it round herself again, and then she strode to her throne, which is the tallest mountain in Scotland, Beinn Nevis or Ben Nevis. And from there she sits and she watches and she waits for the first sign of the coming of her sister, Bríd, or bride, who is the goddess of summer. And at the first sign of Bríd's arrival, they'll have a bit of a fight. And perhaps Bríd might triumph, or perhaps Beira might triumph, but eventually Bríd triumphs, and that's why we have summer. And Beira retreats and rests a while and gathers her strength until towards the end of the year she comes back to fight Bríd and of course triumphs, and that's why we have winter. So that's the story of Beira, the goddess of winter and creator of Oliba. So this winter, let's raise a glass to Beira and enjoy her reign until the return of Bríd and of spring next year.